Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My dear students, in today's lecture we are going to see what are preference shares and its features. Now see here, before starting with the topic, whenever a company wants to grow, it needs additional capital for expansion, right? In the previous lecture when we were studying equity shares and its features, we saw that Mr. A and B along with the other shareholders, they started a factory, right? But for that one additional capital which they required after certain years, they contacted X, Y and Z for the additional capital. At that time only we saw the bifurcation between the two, that is equity shares and preference shares. So now see here, whenever a company wants to grow, it needs additional capital for expansion. One of the ways to raise capital is to issue preference shares to the investors, right? Mr. X, Mr. Y and Mr. Z, they were the investors. They invested in preference shares. Preference shares allow an investor to own a stake at the issuing company, to own a position, to own certain holdings of the company. Now, this is done with a condition that whenever the company decides to pay dividend, the holders of the preference shares will be the first to be paid dividend. This is the most important bifurcation between the two, that is equity shares and preference shares. See, at the time of the payment of dividend, who is the last one to get the dividend? Equity shareholders. So then who comes before equity shareholders? Yes, preference shareholders. See, the holders of the preference shares will be the first to be paid dividends. Now, dividend payment of preference shareholders is fixed. Okay, the second most important point regarding preference shares is dividend, the rate of dividend is fixed. See, dividend payment of the preference shares is fixed, and if somehow company liquefies, the company gets liquidated, the owners of the preference shares will be the first to get their money back after the company has paid back its debts. That means the three most important points regarding preference shares is they are the holders of the shares who receive dividend before equity shareholders. Second, the rate of dividend is fixed. And the third one is at the time of liquidation of the company, they are the first one to get their money back. Now coming to the actual meaning of preference shares. See, as the name indicates, these shares have certain preferential rights, priority rights, distinct from those attached to equity shares. The shares which carry following preferential rights are termed as preference shares. See, two most important we have already seen, a preferential right as to payment of dividend. Now, preferential right over whom? Preferential right over equity shareholders. A preferential right as to payment of dividend during the lifetime of the company. Second one you have got as a preferential right as to the return of capital in the event of winding up of the company, or I can say when the company is closed. The two most important point, preferential right as to payment of dividend, preferential right as to return of capital. Now what do you mean by the distinct? Distinct means different. See, the holder of preference shares have a prior right to receive fixed rate of dividend before any dividend is paid to equity shares. See, the rate of dividend is fixed, and it is fixed by the preference shareholders, which is again decided by the board of directors. See, the rate of dividend is prescribed at the time of issue only. Okay, when the company is going to issue the shares, the rate of dividend is predetermined. Now see here on the top there is something written. What are preference shares? It's relevant for fixed income investors. Relevant for fixed income investor, that means appropriate for fixed income investors. The persons who are not ready to take risk, or who are ready to take risk at a lower rate, would be investing in preference shares as the rate of dividend is fixed. Normally, preference shares do not carry any voting right. They have got no voting right. Now, when we say no voting right, that means as compared to the equity shareholders got the voting right in almost all the matters of the company. Why? Because they were the owners of the company. But now here, see, normally preference shareholders do not carry any voting right. They have voting right only on matters which affect their interest, such as selling of undertaking or changing rights of preference shares. Changing rights of preference shares, that means, what do you understand by the changing rights of preference shares? If the company is trying to change certain rights of the preference shareholders, let's say the company was issuing dividend every 6 months. Now the company is trying to pay dividend every year, that is annually. So yes, change in any of the rights of the preference shares, at that time they are going to have certain voting powers, or they get voting rights if dividend remains unpaid. When a company is not in a position to pay the dividend, at that time they have got the right to vote. Who has got the right to vote? Preference shareholders. See, the preference shareholders are the co-owners of the company but not the controllers. This is what we are going to see. Who are the owners of the company? Equity shareholders. We have studied almost many a times. Equity shareholders are the owners of the company, but preference shareholders are the co-owners of the company. These shares are purchased by cautious investors, cautious, careful investors who are interested in safety of investment. Safety of investment, that is, here you see safety of investment, return of capital money before equity shareholders. So can I say my capital got saved, or I can say my investment is safe, as at the time of liquidation of the company I will be the first one to get the capital. And secondly, who wants steady returns on investment? Steady returns, steady means fixed return on investment. Now only we have studied the rate of preference share is fixed, the rate of dividend of preference shares is fixed. So can I say it is steady returns on investment? That is, I will be getting fixed return on investments. Now coming to the features of the preference shares, see here, features of the preference shares, few of the features are based on what we have studied or what we have seen. Now only those 3 important points. Okay, what are those 3 important points? Payment of dividend got priority before equity share capital. Rate of dividend is fixed. Third one, prior payment of capital, priority over equity share holders. Now coming to the very first one, preference for dividend. See, preference shares have the first charge on the distributable amount of annual profit. Now, once the company has paid all its debts, who is going to have the first charge on the net annual profit? Preference shareholders, priority over equity share capitals. See, preference shares have the first charge on the distributable amount of annual net profit. The dividend is payable to the preference shareholders before it is paid to equity shareholders. Now, second point you have got as preference for repayment of capital. We have seen at the time of liquidation of the company. See, preference shareholders have a preference over equity shareholders in respect of return of capital when the company is liquidated. At the time of liquidation of company, when the company is about to get liquidated or when the company is about to get closed, who has got the priority to get the capital back? Preference shareholders have got the priority over equity shareholders. See, it saves preference shareholders from capital loss. What is capital loss? See, we have seen in the previous lecture, capital loss is something when your purchase price is higher than your selling price. But here, in which context we are going to say is at the time of liquidation, they would be getting their capital prior before equity share capital. So can I say that there is a less chances of capital loss? It saved the preference shareholders from capital losses. The third point you have got as fixed return. We have earlier seen in the meaning, the rate of dividend is fixed. Secondly, it is decided when the company issues its shares. These shares carry dividend at fixed rate. See, the rate of dividend is predetermined at the time of issue. You can see in an example, earn 8% fixed annual interest on your investment. Here, interest, what is the interest? If we compare it to the shares, you get dividend, right? Fixed annual dividend on your investments. See, why the reason I have taken this image here is because you have to know the difference between the two. Interest is paid on all the other investment, but when the topic comes for shares, the return you get on shares is known as dividend. So can I say fixed rate of dividend is given to the preference shareholders? Now see, it may be in the form of fixed sum. It may be in the form of fixed sum, that means fixed amount, or it may be calculated at fixed rate. Now, dividend can be paid in two ways. Either the fixed sum of amount, let's say, on shares, I can say on per share you will be getting, let's say 100 per share annually. This is fixed sum. Or I can say 5% annually. This is fixed rate. See, the preference shareholders are entitled to dividend which can be paid only out of profit. Only and only out of profit. If the directors in financial crisis decide not to pay dividend, the preference shareholders have no claim for dividend. See, when the company is not making sustainable profit or when the company is going in loss, directors may not declare dividend for the preference shares and preference shareholders have no claim for dividend. Now coming to the fourth point is your nature of capital. Is it a permanent capital? No. What is permanent capital? Equity capital is the permanent capital. Now see, preference shares do not provide permanent share capital. Which share capital provides permanent capital? We have seen in the previous lectures, equity share capital. So now what is the difference between the two? Equity shares and preference shares. Preference shares do not provide permanent share capital. They are redeemed after certain period of time. Redeemed. The meaning for the word redeemed is to buy or to pay off. I would either pay the money to the preference shareholders and I will get the shares back. Say, when we say they are redeemed after certain period of time, it may be 10 years, 15 years or 20 years or 25 years or any other n number of years, but then before in the lifetime of the company has to pay back money to the preference shareholders and get their shares back. Company has to redeem its preference shares. A company cannot issue irredeemable preference shares. That is, a company has to pay its capital back to the preference shareholders. A company cannot issue irredeemable preference shares. See, preference capital is generally raised at a later stage when the company gets established. See, we have seen in the example, when the company wants to raise additional capital for its expansion or diversification, when the company is established, at that time only company issues preference shares. See, these shares are issued to satisfy the need for additional capital of the company. We have seen in the starting only. Preference share capital is safe capital as the rate of dividend and market value does not fluctuate. There is no fluctuation in the rate of dividend as the rate of dividend is fixed. The most important feature of preference shares. When the rate is fixed, there is no chances of fluctuating. So can I say there won't be any fluctuating rates in the market value? Why? Because the returns are fixed. Fifth point, you are coming with the same market value. The market value of preference shares does not change as rate of dividend payable to them is fixed. See, when there is no point of increase and decrease in the returns, the market value mostly remains constant. See, the capital appreciation is considered to be low as compared to equity shares. Capital appreciation, increase in the value. See, there are a lot of chances when we compare it to the equity shareholders. Let's say I have got equity shares of rupees 10 each. So, when the company is working very nice, the company is earning huge profit, can I say there are chances the rate of those shares will be increasing in the market? Why? Because the company is going to pay me dividend at higher rate. At the same time, when I'm going to compare it with the preference shareholders, the rate of dividend is fixed. So can I say there won't be any appreciation in the capital? Yes, of course, the capital appreciation is considered to be low when we compare it to the equity shares. The sixth point you are getting is voting rights. We have seen they have got no voting rights. They have got voting rights only on those matters which affect their interest. See, the preference shares do not have normal voting rights. They do not enjoy right of control on the affairs of the company. Right of control on the affairs of the company, that means they have got no right to select their board of directors. Who has got this right? Equity shareholders. See, they have voting rights on any resolution of the company directly affecting their rights, their interest. Okay. See, what are the examples when they have got the right to vote in the company? Change in terms of repayment of capital. Let's say the company is going to increase the years of redemption, okay, redeemable preference shares. When the company is going to increase the years for redemption, at that time they have got the voting right. When dividend payable to them are in arrears for last 2 years. What do you understand by the word arrears? It's due for the last 2 consecutive years. In those conditions, they have got the right to vote in the company. Coming to the seventh point, you have got as risk. The investors who are cautious generally purchase preference shares. We have already seen cautious investors. What do you mean by the word cautious? Cautious means careful or mindful. See, there are 2 advantages to buy preference shares. Advantages that are attached with preference shares are safety of capital. Coming to the same, safety of capital, that is, at the time of liquidation, they are going to get that capital back. There is a safety of capital. And the second one you have got as steady returns on investment. What do you mean by steady? Fixed return on investment. We have seen they have got fixed rate of interest. See, these shares are boon for shareholders during depression period when interest rate is continuously falling. Now see, when the investors, they invest in preference shares rather than keeping any fixed deposit or depositing the amount in the bank. When there is a depression, the bank rates, the interest rate falls. But here the preference shareholders have got this one advantage, that they have got fixed return on investment. The rate of dividend is fixed. Coming to the eighth one, face value. Just having a quick recap. What is face value? Face value is the original value of a share or stock stated on the share certificate. See, we have seen the face value of equity shares it's a very nominal value. I could say 10, rupee 1 or rupee 10. But same when compared with preference shares, face value of preference shares is relatively higher than equity shares. They are normally issued at a face value of rupees 100. So now you have to remember 2 things. Equity share capital, rupee 1 or rupee 10. Preference share capital higher than equity share, and it's normally issued at rupees 100. Coming to the ninth one, rights or bonus issue. Clearly it is said that preference shareholders are not entitled for right issue or bonus issue. We have seen what is right issue and what is bonus issues when we studied features of equity shares. Coming to the last point, what is the nature of investor? Okay, what nature of an investor, why the investor is going to invest in preference shares? See, preference shares attract moderate type of investors. Moderate in what? Moderate in taking risk. See here, there is a riskometer. You can see it's a moderate kind of risk when a person invests in preference shares. Investors who are conservative, who are cautious, who are interested in safety of capital and who wants steady returns on their investment generally purchase preference shares. When a person is not ready and it's not a nature of a person to take a lot of risk, at that time the person invests in preference shares. Now we have come to the end of the topic. See here, features of preference shares at a glance. Preference for dividend, preference for repayment of capital, fixed return, nature of capital, it's not permanent, market value, we have got voting rights, 7th is risk, 8th is face value which is higher than equity shares, that is rupees 100, rights or bonus issue, clearly it said preference shareholders have no right issue or bonus issue advantage, and the last one is nature of investor. A quick short assignment is here, and that's all for today. Thank you, class.